Billionaire father watches black waitress let disabled son lead a dance, then changes her life forever. The air grew heavy with silence at Kingsley's, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Conversations halted, silverware paused mid-air, and every eye turned toward the narrow space between the tables. 10-year-old Lucas Montgomery stood trembling, his legs braced in metal supports, unsteady as he extended a hand toward Diana Johnson, the restaurant's only black waitress. A soft tune from the live piano had just begun, and the boy's request to dance came without warning or hesitation. "Sir, control your son," Manager Thornton snapped, his voice breaking the stillness. "This isn't a ballroom. Our staff aren't here to amuse guests' children." Richard Montgomery, founder of Montgomery Investments and one of America's wealthiest men, felt a tightness in his chest. It was the first time he had brought Lucas out for dinner since the accident 2 years ago, the one that left his son partially paralyzed. It was a mistake he had been avoiding, but tonight had changed that. "It's revengeous, Vince." "Lucas, sit down." His tone was low, firm. Deanna stayed still, her eyes flicking from the manager to the billionaire, and finally to the boy still waiting with his hand outstretched. In her 5 years at Kingsley's, she had learned how to blend in, especially around patrons like Montgomery. "Mr. Thornton, I'm ending my shift." Her voice was even as she untied her apron and placed it on a tray. Then, in a move that caught everyone off guard, she smiled gently at Lucas and took his hand. "I can't dance with an apron on." Richard rose abruptly. "What do you think you're doing?" She met his stare calmly. "Accepting an invitation, sir." Before anyone could stop them, Lucas took an unsure step forward. His legs scraped slowly, the braces making a sharp metallic sound across the floor. Diana didn't pull or push him. She simply matched his pace. "She's going to be fired tomorrow," someone at a nearby table whispered. Richard remained frozen. A memory surfaced. Elizabeth, his late wife, dancing with Lucas in the living room. "It's not about getting it right," she used to say. "It's about making a connection." As Diana moved with Lucas through a few awkward steps, something shifted in the boy's face. The fear faded, replaced by focus. His embarrassment turned to a quiet sense of pride. For the first time since his injury, no one was helping, correcting, or pitying him. He was taking the lead. "Mr. Montgomery," the manager spoke again, pulling Richard from his thoughts. "Rest assured, this won't be repeated. She will be disciplined." Still, Richard said nothing. The room watched, holding its breath. A man with his influence could end someone's career with a single comment. The staff had stopped working. Customers stared, some out of curiosity, others unsure of what to make of what they had just witnessed. But in Richard's mind, only Lucas's small smile remained. After a few more steps, Diana guided the boy back to his seat. "Thank you for asking me to dance," she said formally, as if addressing a peer. "It was an honor." She turned to go. "Wait," Richard called after her. His voice sounded unfamiliar, even to himself. "What's your full name?" "Deanna Johnson, sir." He nodded slowly, repeating the name. "Deanna Johnson." It was as if he needed to remember it. Reaching into his jacket, he produced a business card and offered it to her. "My office, tomorrow, 10 a.m. The room collectively inhaled. Diana took the card without reacting, but her hand trembled faintly. "Dad?" Lucas's voice broke the silence as she walked away. "Why did you do that?" The question lingered, sharp and unresolved. Richard looked at his son, and for the first time in 2 years, didn't just see the child Elizabeth had left behind, but a whole person, a boy with emotions, desires, and a quiet strength he had overlooked. As the evening continued in uneasy silence, no one noticed Diana's final glance before leaving. It wasn't fearful or uncertain, but steady, with a quiet resolve that contrasted the growing turmoil behind Richard Montgomery's eyes. If this story about dignity and transformation touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe on Philo. This story to see how a simple act of respect can quietly ignite change, change that can reshape lives in lasting ways. The lobby of Montgomery Tower gleamed, with marble and glass catching the morning light. Diana Johnson felt immediately out of place, despite wearing her best, a navy skirt and a white blouse bought on discount. People passed her in outfits that likely cost more than her rent. "Diana Johnson to see Mr. Montgomery," she told the receptionist, who gave her a brisk, appraising look before making a call. 18th floor. Miss Winters will meet you. In the elevator, Diana took a steadying breath, clutching her worn handbag close. It wasn't fear she felt, just a quiet determination built from having endured far worse. Miss Winters, a sharply dressed woman in her 40s, had a poised stance and a discerning gaze. Mr. Montgomery is on a conference call. Follow me, she said. As they walked through mirrored corridors, Diana noticed curious glances from staff. A black woman being escorted through the executive offices drew enough attention to stir whispers. He'd had you fired, didn't he? Winters asked suddenly, once they were alone in a waiting room. It happens. A powerful client complains and people like you lose their jobs. People like me? Diana asked, her tone neutral. You know what I mean, Winters replied, adjusting her glasses. Employees who don't know their place. Diana gave a faint, knowing smile. And where exactly would that be? Before Winters could respond, her phone rang. He'll see you now. Richard Montgomery's office spanned half the floor. Through the expanse of windows, Manhattan looked distant and detached, almost like a miniature city. Diana greeted him formally. Mr. Montgomery. He turned, his expression carefully composed. Miss Johnson, thank you for coming. He gestured to a chair. Please, sit. The silence that followed was intentional. Diana recognized the tactic instantly, an engineered pause meant to make others speak too soon or too much. Do you have a background? Richard finally asked. I'm sorry? Your education. Diana met his eyes. Bachelor's in Child Development from NYU. I started a master's in special education. Didn't finish. Something flickered across his face, maybe surprise. And you're working as a waitress? I work 3 jobs, actually. The restaurant, a bookstore on weekends, and tutoring when I can get clients. Richard moved to the desk and picked up a folder. I looked into you, Miss Johnson. Wanted to know more about the woman who, he hesitated, danced with my son. He opened the folder, revealing photos of a community center. Freedom Steps, she said, sitting up straighter. I co-founded it with my sister Zoe. It's a dance program for children with physical disabilities. Richard flipped through a few pages. It's about to shut down, no funding. Diana showed no reaction. Of course, he would have found that out already. I didn't come here to ask for money, Mr. Montgomery. Then why are you here? You invited me. Richard gave a dry chuckle. Fair enough. He stood again, pacing slightly. I want to hire you. Diana looked at him, confused. As a waitress in your home? His expression turned serious. As a therapeutic companion. For Lucas. Diana noticed his eyes drift to a photo on the table. A woman, smiling, holding a baby. Saying his son's name seemed to carry weight. I've hired the best professionals, therapists, neurologists, psychologists, Richard said. But what you did yesterday? It was just a dance, Mr. Montgomery. It was the first time I'd seen him smile since the accident. The words came out reluctantly, edged with pain. I don't want a dancer, he added. I want someone who can do what you did, follow his lead, not direct him. Diana studied him. Beneath his composed exterior, she saw what many might miss, a grieving, overwhelmed father. I'll pay you 5 times what you earn now. Diana rose. No. Richard appeared stunned, as though unused to hearing that word. I don't work for people who see only my race or my status before they see my skill, she said evenly. And I definitely don't work for people who try to buy solutions for emotional challenges. Richard's face turned red. You're refusing an offer that could fix your financial problems because of pride? No, Diana corrected. Because of dignity, and because your son deserves more than someone paid to act like they care. She stepped toward the door, then paused. Lucas doesn't need more experts. He needs space to live his own life. You don't know my son, Richard said. No, Diana agreed. But I understand people like him. People whose physical limits are far less restrictive than the invisible barriers we create around them. She took a card from her purse and placed it on the table. Freedom Steps. Classes are Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4:00 p.m. If you'd like to bring Lucas, the first session is free. As Diana exited, she passed Winters, who had clearly been eavesdropping. You just turned down Richard Montgomery? She whispered in disbelief. Are you out of your mind? Diana smiled. Maybe, but I'd rather be crazy than be owned. The following Wednesday, Diana stood behind the reception desk at the community center when Zoe, her sister and co-founder, rushed up. "There's a Bentley outside," she whispered, adjusting her hijab nervously. "And you won't believe who's in it." Diana looked through the window and saw the luxury car. Lucas sat in the back, peering out anxiously. Richard remained behind the wheel, as if battling something inside himself. "He's not coming in," Zoe predicted. "Men like that don't step into places like this." But Diana remembered the expression on Lucas's face when he had danced. Don't underestimate a determined child. As they watched, the car door opened. Lucas stepped out, adjusting his mobility aids, and to everyone's surprise, Richard followed. The billionaire looked awkward in casual pants and a sweater, clearly an effort to appear modest, though privilege still clung to him. "I told you he'd come," Diana murmured, more to herself than to Zoe. Zoe stared. "What did you do?" Diana didn't respond. Her eyes sparkled with a quiet secret, one even her sister didn't fully know. In her small Bronx apartment beneath her bed was a notebook. It held years of notes about children like Lucas, and men like Richard Montgomery. Observations, research, and a plan that all started with one simple act: saying yes to a dance. What Richard Montgomery didn't realize, what he could never grasp from his world of glass offices and limitless wealth, was that Diana Johnson wasn't just a waitress who danced with his son. She had a purpose, and his fortress of status and solitude was about to face its greatest disruption. The truth that the most valuable lessons in life can't be bought, they must be experienced. Freedom Steps operated out of a converted warehouse in the community. Posters on the walls read, "Your rhythm, your rules, and every move counts." When Richard and Lucas stepped inside, children with different mobility devices were moving freely to a soft rhythm. Diana approached, wearing casual clothes bearing the program's logo. "Welcome, Mr. Montgomery." Lucas stared, captivated. A girl in a wheelchair spun in smooth circles. A boy with a prosthetic leg crafted a fluid dance sequence. "It looks disorganized," Richard commented, clearly uneasy. "There's structure," Diana replied, "just not the kind you're used to." She turned to Lucas. "Would you like to join?" He nodded excitedly, then hesitated, looking at his father. "Go ahead," Richard said, tense. "I'll be right here." As Diana led Lucas into the group, Zoe walked over and offered Richard a seat. "The first day's always the toughest," she said, "for the parents, not the kids." "This isn't therapy," Richard protested. "I've already hired top rehabilitation specialists." "And how has that been working for Lucas?" Zoe asked gently. The studio door opened. An older woman entered, leaning on a carved cane. Her gray hair was braided neatly, and her presence was commanding. Zoe leaned toward Richard. "That's Dr. Elaine Mercer, a retired Harvard neuroscientist. Specializes in brain plasticity." The woman greeted a few children before noticing Richard. "Mr. Montgomery, you've turned down my research proposal 3 times in the past 2 years." "Dr. Mercer, I didn't expect to see you here," he replied. "I oversee this research program," she explained. "We're studying how non-directive movement approaches affect brain reconfiguration in children with motor challenges." Richard raised an eyebrow. "I thought this was just a dance class for the community." Diana returned to the floor, leaving Lucas to explore movement with another child. "Freedom Steps is actually a pilot rehab program," she said. "It's based on the theory of movement autonomy. We combine adaptive dance with neuroscience." "Then why are you working as a waitress if you're running a research program?" "Because we don't have the funding yet, and because people like you have rejected us 3 times. It clicked. "You were Dr. Mercer's assistant on those proposals." "Co-author," Dr. Mercer corrected him. "Diana doesn't have a completed master's degree. She left school to care for her sister. But her theoretical contributions are innovative." "You knew who I was at the restaurant," Richard said slowly. "From the moment you walked in," Diana confirmed, "and when Lucas stood up to dance, I saw a chance to demonstrate rather than explain." "Was the dance staged?" "Absolutely not. Lucas chose to move, I chose to respond." A group of reporters entered the studio. Richard stiffened. "Part 2 of the plan?" Diana gave a faint smile. Zoe handed Richard a freshly printed article. "Revolutionary motor rehabilitation methodology shows promising results." "We published our initial findings today," Dr. Mercer explained. So we invited the press. You used my son for publicity. Richard's voice was cold. Deanna guided him into a side room. Photos of children lined the walls, each accompanied by handwritten notes charting their progress. At the end was an empty frame. What's that for? He asked. Our future. The full rehab center we could build with proper funding. We could help 500 children a year instead of just 50. You arranged all this? Richard asked quietly. The dance, the meeting, bringing me here on press day. I saw a window and took it. 4 months ago, when you canceled our meeting without even reading the proposal, I promised I'd find another way. Deanna! Zoe rushed in. It's Lucas. They hurried back. Lucas stood in the center of the room, surrounded by other kids. The music had stopped. Everyone watched quietly as the boy removed one of his braces and tried to balance with only one. Lucas, Richard began, stepping forward. Wait, Diana whispered, just watch. Lucas took a breath, steadied himself, and astonishing everyone, especially his father, took a full step without full support. It was wobbly, small, but entirely his own. The room burst into cheers. Cameras flashed. Richard, usually reserved and unreadable, now stood with emotion in his eyes. That's why we started Freedom Steps, Deanna said softly. It's not about perfect steps. It's about those first independent ones. Richard looked at his son, not as a challenge to solve, but as a whole person finding his own strength. This could have happened without you manipulating me, he said at last. It could have if you'd returned our calls or read the proposal, all 3 times. Reporters began noticing Richard. A quiet buzz spread through the room. But Lucas, unaware of the tension, kept practicing, focused and determined. Unobtained. Richard Montgomery stood at a crossroads. Withdraw in anger, confirming his image as cold and unreachable? Whether to seize control or embrace the moment his son had created? Richard stood at a crossroads between the authority he had always exercised and the independence Lucas now sought. For the first time, he found himself in unfamiliar territory. His wealth and influence, once defining factors in every decision, held no bearing here. The man who once orchestrated every detail of his world now faced a dilemma that power couldn't resolve. His eyes moved between his smiling son and the press gathered nearby, awaiting his reaction. Humility had never been part of Richard's nature, but seeing the change in Lucas sparked something deep within him. The familiar symphony of control and status now played a different melody, and he had to choose. Would he keep leading, or would he learn to follow? Richard Montgomery faced the cameras and reporters who eagerly waited for a statement. His son had just made a public, independent move, led skillfully by Diana Johnson, into a moment that left little room for scripted responses. Mr. Montgomery, a reporter called out, can you comment on your presence at the Freedom Steps event? Is it true your foundation rejected funding this initiative 3 times? Richard glanced at Lucas, who remained focused on practicing his new step, unaware of the political weight around him. Then, in a move that caught everyone off guard, especially Diana, he smiled. You know what's most difficult for someone like me, he said, addressing the reporter but ensuring the room could hear? Admitting when we've been wrong. A hush fell over the room. The Montgomery Foundation is proud to announce full funding for Freedom Steps for the next 5 years, along with the construction of a permanent rehabilitation center based on the model developed by Dr. Mercer and Ms. Johnson. The room lit up with camera flashes. Zoe gasped audibly. But there's one condition, Richard added, as Deanna instinctively braced herself. That Ms. Johnson retains full control over the program and its methodology without any corporate involvement. 3 months later, bulldozers cleared land for the new Freedom Steps Rehabilitation Center. It wasn't the flashiest project the Montgomery Foundation had supported, but it was the most forward-thinking. Every part of the facility was designed with guidance from the children and families it would serve. Diana remained closely involved in overseeing construction, and she was rarely alone. Lucas visited often, sometimes bringing other children along. And, much to the team's continued surprise, Richard Montgomery also appeared regularly, quietly observing. I never expected you to show up to board meetings, Diana remarked one afternoon as they reviewed the latest blueprints. I never expected to be studying neuroplasticity at 50, Richard replied, rubbing his eyes, the table in front of him cluttered with research papers and sticky notes. But here we are. Diana looked at him thoughtfully. Is this part of your public redemption, or do you genuinely care? Lucas asked to have his second brace removed last week. I know, she said. His previous therapist said that wouldn't be possible for at least 2 years. Deanna smiled. But you had her replaced because you said she was wrong. And there she was, Diana, pointing to a photo of Lucas balancing with just one crutch. He's progressing faster than any conventional medical forecast, she said. Why did you never accept my apology? Richard asked suddenly. Because you never actually gave one, she replied. You shifted funding, altered policies, and supported our program. But that's not an apology. That's compensation. Richard nodded slowly. Fair. 6 months later, at the opening ceremony, the scene was a stark contrast to that evening in the restaurant. The expansive, adaptive space buzzed with children using various mobility devices, freely moving across the main hall. Lucas, now needing only a light brace on his left leg, led a choreographed routine with 3 other kids. His movement was still restricted, but carried a newfound ease and confidence no physician had anticipated. From a distance, Richard watched, choosing not to interfere. He doesn't need you to hold him anymore, Diana said quietly as she approached. No, Richard agreed, but he still needs me nearby. That matters. He turned to her. Thank you. For what exactly? She asked. For teaching me how to follow, he replied. A reporter approached. Mr. Montgomery, how does it feel to witness your son's progress? Richard looked over at Lucas, who was now helping a younger girl find her balance. Proud, he said, not just of what he's overcome, but of what he's helping others build. And what's the most important lesson you've learned throughout this experience? Richard Montgomery, once known solely for his financial empire, looked directly into the camera. That true leaders don't force others down the path they believe is right, but instead recognize when someone else shows a better way and have the humility to follow it. A year later, the Freedom Steps program expanded to 3 new cities. Dana received the Pediatric Rehabilitation Innovation Award, and her methods began rolling out in hospitals nationwide. Lucas, now using a lightweight cane only on tough days, enrolled in mainstream school and became a youth ambassador for the program, encouraging other children to find their own rhythm. And Richard learned the most difficult and valuable lesson of all, that real influence doesn't come from directing every move. It comes from recognizing when to step aside and let others lead. In a world where the powerful seldom shift their views and those without power often remain unheard, the story of Richard, Diana, and Lucas reminds us of something vital. Transformation happens when we step beyond the unseen lines that divide us. When a billionaire learns from a waitress. When a father chooses to follow his son's lead. If this story, about how a simple act of respect changed lives, moved you, subscribe to our channel. Because we believe the most meaningful revolutions don't begin with headlines or vast fortunes. They begin when one person dares to take an honest first step, and someone else is wise enough to walk beside them.